An Art Spark Texas community conversation with Skye Howell, honoring Native American heritage beyond Land Acknowledgements and Diversity Months.
My name is Susan Slattery. I'm Director of Art Spark Texas, and I'm here with our guest today, Skye Howell. Skye is a white Native woman who was tribalized when her father was removed from their Native family and community at the age of 5. She's a proud parent of a first grader, a circle keeper, and anti-racist educator who advocates for educational equity regardless of race, ability level, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or other differences. She uses art, music, literature, and movement to curate spaces of healing and restoration in her community. And to further introduce her, our executive director, Celia Hughes, is with us as well, and she might have a couple things to say.
I had the pleasure to work with Skye several years ago in a program where we were working with young people with disabilities, which launched our New Media Arts program. And so I was delighted to reconnect with her this year when I reached out looking for some information on land acknowledgement and making sure that what we were doing with our land acknowledgements were respectful and correct and appropriate. So I'm delighted that Skye is with us tonight.
Welcome, Skye.
Bonjour. Indesnaka Skye Howell, Potawatomi, Ottawa, Indow. My name is Skye Howell of the Potawatomi and Ottawa Tribal Nations, and it is an honor to be in community with each of you here today. I'm going to navigate this technology here and share my screen with you. I don't know where it disappeared to, but we're going to try to bring that back. We want to begin by offering this land acknowledgement, and as a way of honoring all those who came before us, and also as a necessary first step in affirming the truth of our shared history. And if you would like to learn more about our Native community, I invite you to connect with Great Promise for American Indians. And again, I wanted to share a little bit. I'll be sharing some of my Native language with you all tonight. And so that is something that's important to us, and really being able to share in culture and practices. So, Bonjour, Indesnakas Skye Howell, Potawatomi, Ottawa, Indow. My name is Skye Howell of the Potawatomi and Ottawa Tribal Nations, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I invite you to get comfortable and notice what it is that's supporting your body in this moment. Locate your breathing and take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, let go of any stress or anxiety that you may be holding on to in this moment. We recognize the complexity and the privilege of gathering online today by sharing a digital land acknowledgement written in part by Adrienne Wong of Spiderweb Show in Ontario. Since our meeting is shared digitally into the internet, let us take a moment to acknowledge the legacy of colonization embedded within technologies, structures, and the ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not readily available in many Indigenous and marginalized communities. We invite you to join in acknowledging your shared responsibility to make good of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. Let us take a moment to honor the original stewards of this land and region here in Central Texas and in Texas beyond. We honor one of the oldest known tribes to this region, the Coahuiltecan, the federally recognized tribes, including the Alabama Coshada tribe of Texas, the Kickapoo traditional tribe of Texas, the Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and the Comanche, the Mescalero Apaches, the Tonkawa, the Karankawa, the Eastern Pueblo, the Caddo, the Carrizo, and Comacrudo, as well as the state-recognized tribes including the Lacan Apache tribe and the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians. We honor all the American Indian and Indigenous people and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas. Let us honor all those who have been detribalized, all those who were formerly enslaved, all those who are missing still yet today and who have been murdered. We honor all those who have been colonized. Please understand for all that has been done to eradicate our people and all the violence that continues on our man-made borderlands, that we are still here. We are resilient and we are proud. We will continue to fight injustice and oppression in its many forms, and we are in solidarity and community with those who encounter hatred due to their sex, their sexual orientation, their gender, their ability level, their religion, their ethnicity, race, and in particular, all those who continue to face anti-Blackness daily because the color of their skin has been weaponized. I invite you to take a deep and collective breath in. And as you exhale, please rejoin together in this virtual community. Megwatch. I'd like to share with you all a video now from Honoring Native Land, and it just really talks about the significance of a land acknowledgement. Why do we do this?
I begin this morning, I'd like to recognize the Algonquin
U.S. Department of Arts and Culture.
territory we are gathering. We acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land.
Honor native land. In countries such as Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, it is commonplace, even policy, to open events and gatherings by acknowledging the traditional Indigenous inhabitants of that land.
Wherever I go on God's green earth, I do the Lakota tradition of acknowledging four directions, the land, and the people living there. Uchimaka, as I call Grandmother Earth, the land, I view her as a sacred, living entity, and that's the way we acknowledge it in Lakota thought and philosophy.
As a Native person, I'm ready for any kind of confrontation that might come up. I'm preparing myself to remind people of all the things that they forget about. I was at a meeting in Minneapolis, and the room was primarily non-Native people. I was in a non-Native organization, but this executive director got up and said, "Okay, we're gonna get started." So everybody, was sitting down and getting quiet. That I'd like to get started by acknowledging the Indigenous culture of Minnesota. And I was like, first, I was like, wow, and it made everything like fall away a little bit for me. My guard went down. I was more relaxed because by saying that, like, that means she understands something that is just like you can't talk about, right? It just relaxed me as a minority, as a woman, and as a Native person. Like it just like pulled away this layer that's always there. It was super cool.
We're at a time where non-Native cultures are understanding the traditions of Indigenous peoples for probably the first time in our histories. So like when I go to New Zealand, the protocol is to acknowledge each other's ancestors and your mountains and your rivers. And that's such a beautiful tradition. When people are in that space and say, we acknowledge who you are, this land, where your people come from, they're saying we acknowledge a relationship, but we're also creating that relationship. This is a good thing.
The important thing would be that folks would then sit with that. Like, what does it mean that our settlement is occupying this space? And what responsibility do I have considering that legacy to these contemporary things, right? And how do I stop myself from that? Ideally, that would be for me the impact that this has. If you start acknowledging that the land that you're standing on and the space that you are in belong to people that are still here, like, make so much more room for understanding of all of these other issues. It's one of those little things that, like, if it could just tip a little bit, all the like dominoes that could fall from it, I think are important. Now I'm like imagining it and like wanting to live in that, like the thing that I'm imagining, like, yeah, that's actually really beautiful.
It's just being a genuine human being to acknowledge each other's histories, the good and the bad.
We call on all individuals and organizations to open public events and gatherings with acknowledgments of the traditional native inhabitants of the land. Together, we can spark a movement to spread this practice, moving toward full truth and reconciliation. Learn more and learn how, www.usdac.us/native land.
So thank you everyone for listening with that video, and we will be sharing the links as we go along. And I believe in the beyond this time that we're together to be able to continue to connect with the different resources that are shared here today. So how do we move beyond a land acknowledgement? How do we move beyond just here, just celebrating for Indigenous Peoples Day, but really honoring our Native culture as we are right here today in contemporary Native people? And so this is Native American Heritage Month. It is a time to celebrate the rich and diverse cultural traditions and histories and honor the important contributions of contemporary Native people. And it's also a time to educate with accurate history about tribal nations and to give awareness of the unique challenges that Native people have faced historically, and also the ways in which Native communities have adapted to overcome oppression. And so when we think about our local Native community, and you think about whatever communities that you're a part of, we can work together to further support our Native community, and particularly students and families in schools, by offering culturally responsive curriculum, ensuring the representation in our academic goals and our planning, and also by dispelling racial stereotypes. And so that's some of what we're going to be covering here today. And I just want to give you a few moments to check and look out over the slide here, because we've got some different facts to share.
Content analyses of primetime television and popular films reveal that the inclusion of Native American characters ranges from 0 to 0.4%. 78% of Americans want to learn more about Native people, their histories, cultures, and contemporary stories. 72% believe it is necessary to make significant changes to school curricula on Native American history and culture. Most Americans feel that what they learned or are teaching in schools about Native culture is inaccurate, and they strongly support the need for curriculum change. People often express disappointment or anger that what they were taught was so sparse or misleading. 87% of state-level history standards fail to cover Native people history in a post-1900 context.
And so when we look at representation, there's a real lack of representation for Native American characters, and a lot of times it's relegated to this timestamp in the past. And so I remember last year being the first time I was at a Scholastic Book Fair with my son, and he's 7 years old. We found a book, What Fills Me with Happiness. And in that book, it was the first time I'd ever seen contemporary Native representation. And it was in a board book, and it just really, that filled my heart with happiness. But that is just something that is not anything that is broadly, something that happens a lot. It took me until being almost 40 years old for that experience to happen. And so just having that awareness and having that representation is really important. So really looking at the different resources that are available, I wanted to share Illuminative, and they've got a lot of great artwork and poetry and music, and I know that if you're here with ArtSpark, that is something that is important to you. And so I do want to share this resource with you all tonight.
Illuminatives.org.
So Illuminative, there's available of that can be downloaded and easily that are very easily shared. And so this can be appropriate. Really looking at how Native communities have been impacted in a disproportionate way from COVID-19. Many reservations still do not have running water, and so it's been a lack of access to hospitals and different resources. And so just understanding that disparate impact that our Native communities are facing still yet today. And what's really fantastic about this site as well and illuminative is that they've got representation from Deb Haaland, who's the member of Congress for Arizona. And so there's just some really great ways of appreciating and honoring Native culture, Native communities, and in this contemporary way that doesn't just leave us time-stamped and relegated to the past. And so when we think about, again, how do we serve and support Native students, and if you have members of Native communities within the programs that you serve, really understanding how important it is to have that culturally responsive curriculum, having contemporary expressive arts that are modern. And we're going to be sharing some of the artwork of Eric Tippeconic tonight to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Amplify Art has got some really great artwork as well. And dispelling myths and stereotypes. A lot of times there's just not a lot of known history and things such as that. And so just how do we work through that and share accurate history and accurate representation? Having accurate counts for demographics. And a lot of times Native community members are counted, they're not counted if they're in biracial or multiracial categories, 2 or more races. And so then that means that we're not served well in representation and resources. And the reality is that many of us are biracial, are multiracial. And so how do we make sure that there is accurate accounting in demographics? And then having strategic planning to allow for the resources that are needed to support Native communities and creating authentic ways of community connections. And so Great Promise for American Indians is a really great organization here locally that offers these opportunities for us to connect, to share in culture, to share in traditions. And so that is a really fantastic way. And I know Celia and ArtSpark have really had a great relationship in the past for connecting and building relationships together with Great Promise for American Indians. And so now I just want to invite folks to take a look at some of the themes that are emerging for Eric Tibbeconic's work. And as you're viewing this artwork, consider what are some feelings that are coming up for you. Perhaps what questions do you have when you're looking at this art?
3 acrylic on canvas paintings by Eric Tippeconic. All 3 are portraits of a Native American person in modern dress. All 3 are in bright, bold colors. The first, of a woman in a business suit. She has her hair in braids and wears a headdress with 2 feathers. Stands with her hands on her hips on a red, yellow, and blue background. The second is a man buttoning his jacket over a pink vest. He wears dark sunglasses and a feather headdress. The third, a woman on a flowered background. She wears a blue business suit, her arms crossed. She's smiling. She has her hair in braids and wears a headdress with a single feather.
And I know we've got a small group here, and so I invite you to, if you'd like to share maybe something that's coming up for you as you're viewing this art, as you're thinking about the themes that come up, I invite you to come off mute and share, or you can put it in the chat. And I'm not able to see from my screen anybody. And so again, I invite you to come off mute if you would like to share about what are some themes that emerge for you when you look at Eric Tibbeconic's work. He's a Comanche artist, and he was shown at the Bob Bullock, I believe it was in 2017. We had an installation from him.
So Skye, are you not able to see what people are putting in the chat?
Every time I click that chat box, my whole screen disappears. So I'm having a hard time navigating that.
So Silva has said that she finds the painting strong and vibrant and modern. I said I like the colors, that they're not really associated with Native American art traditionally. Miss Boy said that she sees pride, joyous pride, and again, Susan said that they're very strong and very colorful.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate your feedback there. Yeah, he definitely uses very bold color patterns. And what I appreciate and what strikes me is just this blend of like images that we may not associate with Native people, right? Like this blend, a tribute to our culture, both modern and also within our cultural traditions, and using the connections between the regalia that the different people are wearing in the art, and also again that contemporary sense.
Yeah, it strikes me that they're all wearing suits, but then they're wearing the traditional regalia on their heads, which I find. Is there some significance toward that, Skye?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's that juxtaposition, right? So for us as modern Native people, right, like there's this duality that exists, right, and navigating like what does a Native person look like and act like and wear and sound like, right? And so it's making those connections between both the modern and like the professional, right, and the contemporary professional, and also connecting to the traditional dress or the traditional regalia.
Do you want to explain what regalia means? Because I'm sure that maybe people on this call don't know what you're referring to when you say that.
Absolutely. And so the Native dress that you see Native people wear, particularly like maybe at a powwow, you may have been exposed to that. But the headdress that he's wearing, the feathers, wearing jingle dresses, different types of dress are regalia. And so that is what regalia is. And some people may refer to it like as a costume or something like that, but that is just one of those myths that we want to make sure that we're dispelling. That regalia is a traditional dress, and it has got significance depending on what forms it is. So for example, for jingle dresses, for jingle dancers, the jingle dance is a healing dance, and that is something that is regarded very highly, and so that's the significance behind that. And it's worn to be able to do specific dances. And I'll say the first time that I saw his artwork, I was just really, really moved by it. It really resonated for me as a white Native woman who was removed from her culture and my Native family and traditions, right? So there's that sense of not knowing, and everything that we've learned as a family. It's been something that my father and I have had to reclaim and relearn, and learning the traditions and the dances has been really an important part of that process, and sharing that now with my son has been really important. And so this just really struck me for having the representation and this, again, that juxtaposition between the modern and the contemporary and the traditional. And it just was so important, and just really made me very emotional the first time that I saw his artwork.
So I'm wondering, Skye, is there in the one photo, the painting on the upper left, is there significance to those three colors, the yellow, the red, and the blue?
So within his artwork, I'm not sure for that particular painting, but I can definitely find out more about his specific painting. And so there are different colors associated. For example, with the medicine wheel, for the Potawatomi medicine wheel, we use the colors of red and white and black, and so it just depends on kind of what tribe and the connections to the different cultures can be from a different region. So they all can have different significance. And so it may be connected with Comanche art, traditional art, but so it's all different depending on what the tribe is and where you're from in your community.
Would you say that that's one of the stereotypes that white people carry, is that all Native Americans are the same, that they share the same language and the same history and culture?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are over 574 tribal nations that are recognized federally, and with each tribal nation, they're each have their own culture, their own language, their own flag, and their sovereign nations. And so I think that that's something that just is not widely known or understood. And we come in all colors, live in all different places. For some may live on reservations, some live in the city, some live in suburbs, right? So we're all in different places. There's no like one place.
I know that when I grew up in upstate New York, we often talked about the Iroquois Nation, and I think that when I was a child, I was taught information that was incorrect. I mean, I'm sure I was. Because when I go now to try to go back and look for, was there really an Iroquois tribe, or was that an anglicized name for a group of tribes? You might not know the answer to that because you're from Texas, which is very different.
Yeah, I don't know about the Iroquois in particular, but I know there's a lot of different things that have been taught to us that are not accurate. For example, Pocahontas, right? Like that wasn't even her name and her role, and like her story is not this fantasy story that has been broadly shared. And so there's a lot of things that get shared and stories that happen that may not be correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll let you get on with it. I love this picture, so I want to hear about it.
Yeah, for sure. And so I just wanted to share this this comment that Eric had shared. But the subject matter often moves between the contemporary imagery and those from previous historical eras. The vibrancy of colors and the movement of Comanche people serve as metaphors for people who are both part of a bygone historical era and also a living, thriving contemporary nation.
Painting of a Native American man wearing a feathered headdress and a button-up red shirt. He's straightening his tie.
You have in the comment, Becky says, I can relate to duality, experiencing the joys, resiliency, and also hard experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Becky. Yeah, it's really a challenge. And again, not knowing, right? And then also allowing yourself permission to learn and reconnect, right? If you aren't connected to family. My dad was adopted in a closed adoption, so we don't actually know who our family is. We just have what limited records that we have on file saying that we are from the Potawatomi and Ottawa tribal nations. And that's really hard to just have that experience of that not knowing and not knowing if we're ever going to find out. Our hope is that we can uncover these adoption records and find out more information and connect with some of our living family members, but that might not ever happen. And part of my work is just working, with my son to help him grow up and understand who he is fully as a white Native and German boy, and also understanding the accurate history and providing that support for the school district that he's a part of, and being able to share in spaces like these, right? So thank you for the invitation.
Of course.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and move us forward on this deck here. And so I just wanted to share, maybe a map of Texas you maybe haven't seen or maybe aren't familiar with, but really this is some of the original tribal nations. And we do have a lot of different maps, and there's not one that I found that is comprehensive. And so in my land acknowledgement, I honored, I believe, 14 tribes. And as I learn about new tribes, I include them in the land acknowledgement. And part of the problem is that we don't have accurate historical records, and in fact, many have been destroyed, right? But I did want to share this map, and just a different way of kind of looking at Texas. And then also, you know, the myth of Thanksgiving, right? We're coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday, and a lot of people now are celebrating, you know, gratitude for their families and different things like that, not so much the history, but understanding that for Native people, many honor a national day of mourning due to the attacks endured and the lives lost through the attacks from pilgrims and colonizers. And so just understanding that not everyone celebrates, right, in the same way, and that Thanksgiving has a different meaning altogether for Native people.
Map of Native Texas 200 plus years ago. A plaque honoring the National Day of Mourning.
I wanted to share a little bit about the powwow here. And so we've got 2 powwows in our area in Central Texas. And unfortunately, we've had to cancel the in-person powwows. And so the Sacred Springs powwow in San Marcos was virtual. And so you may be able to look that up and see if you can find a clip of that. But these are some of the photos taken. That's my son on the left with his pawpaw, my dad, and just enjoying, you know, this moment of having a community dance. And the drummers from Great Promise for American Indians, we've got our drummers there. And then looking at the powwow pictures, it's just such a beautiful experience. And so I invite you, if you have not ever gone, whenever we're able to have the one in 2021, to go. It is held at the Travis County Expo Center, and then the one in San Marcos is held at the San Marcos Springs, and it's a 2-day powwow. I wanted to share a little video clip of the powwow. This has been such a meaningful experience for our family.
All the people that haven't seen a powwow before, they get to come and share in our tradition, in our culture of dancing and having a good time.
To gather our people from all different nations, representing themselves through their song and their dance and their wares, their dress, their regalia.
Dancers of all ages in an indoor space with an audience watching.
If they're not dancing, they're going to have just as much fun visiting, going around, seeing all the vendors, a lot of vendors that sell their skills and their talents, and that's what they're going to see. And they're going to get a chance to interact with everybody.
The food is always good.
Jewelry and fry bread.
If you are just into culture, it's a great thing to come out and you can see all the different types of regalia and outfits that we wear.
It's a lot of fun. There's tons of things to see, tons of activities, beautiful colors, music. Feel it in your heart. We love food, we love to laugh, we love to joke, have a good time, get together, and we're all family. We're all indigenous to this earth. And it's important for us to take care of them.
And dance in fringed regalia.
Come out and enjoy it. Meet Indian people, talk to them and everything. And so it's just enjoyable because that's the way we always feel.
Men drum and dance, women in jingle dress.
We should all be equal and treat each other equal. And that's what powwows are for. And that's why people come to powwows, because it's that way.
Austin Powwow, November 6, 2021, Travis County Expo Center.
And again, I just invite you to go experience the powwow near or far. If you're from the Austin, San Marcos area, we've got 2, and that they come up in late October, usually the last weekend of October, and also the first weekend of November. And so that's a great way to get connected and to really learn more about our culture and heritage. And then I did want to invite you all, anybody who's tuned in, tomorrow we've got Thursday from 5 to 6:30. We've got a family educational program that's going to be live streamed from Austin ISD. And so we're going to put that link in the chat for folks. And then on Friday from 5 to 7 p.m., we're going to have a film screening on the mayors of Shiprock. And so that's a film about Dene youth leaders. And it's a short documentary film. And we're going to have a panel afterwards to kind of talk more about youth leadership. And it's just a fantastic film. And so again, I just want to thank you all. Do want you to stay in touch. I am a consultant with Full Humanity Consulting. And so you can find us on Facebook or Instagram. You can email me. You can also find me on Twitter at Restorative EDUC. And I'd just like to take any questions that anyone may have.
Full Humanity Consulting at gmail.com, at Full Humanity on Facebook, and Full_Humanity on Instagram.
I've invited everyone to turn on their cameras if they would like, and ask a question. So Lisa, did you have a question?
I do indeed. Skye, first of all, thank you so much for doing that. I'm Lisa Sheps. I run a theater here called Ground Floor Theater. And we would like to add an acknowledgement to the lands that we're on in our future shows. We haven't done so. So my question is, if we are in Austin, are we acknowledging just one tribe, or do we have to go through the entire list that you did at the very beginning?
So different people do it in different ways. I'm happy to help you learn the names of all the tribes. And I just feel like if I know about a tribe that's been in this land and region, part of the reason why I acknowledge all of them is because they were nomadic, right? Like we travel through the seasons, right? And so different tribes may have been around at different times and different time periods, right? You know, some only honor the ones that they have been taught, the Comanche, the Tonkawa, the Karankawa, you know, but for me, it's a matter of personal preference and to honor, like if we're really, you know, honoring Native people, right? Like let's honor them is how I feel.
The graphic that you put up of the state of Texas had one tribe, like Austin had, I think it was, I forgot which one it was, but it had just one tribe there. But you would, in terms of whatever we do for our acknowledgements, that we should really broaden our scope.
So what I will say is with that map that I shared with you, right, like that's not comprehensive. That's not accurate, right? Like it's one snapshot, right? Like if you look at native lands in Texas, right, like you can find so much different imagery. And so it's just not comprehensive. There's just a lack of knowledge. And so, you know, I'm happy to talk with you more and like figure out what might be right for your organization.
That's right. So I can contact you for some help once. Yeah. Obviously, us like others, we're not open. We won't be open until next year. But I would like to add that to our curtain speech.
And I would just like to recognize and also honor a colleague of mine that I see in the room, Becky Murillo. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I invite you to share any perspective that you may have with our work together and just in general.
So I had a question, Skye. So I brought my native flute out while I was turning off the fan, and I wanted to ask you. So I got this native flute from a friend. He passed it on to me because usually when you get a native flute, it's given to you. You don't like buy it; it's just given to you. So this was given to me by a native friend. It has a little wolf on it. I don't know if you can see that. I've played it like numerous times. I'm still learning it, learning the scales, but I wanted to ask you about it. It says, I don't know if you can read that. It says Navajo. Is that a tribe? Because I didn't want to be like, I don't know. I thought it was kind of rude if I were to ask him, well, are you a part of the Navajo tribe?
No,
so,
absolutely.
So I was going to ask you, do you know anything about that?
Yeah. The Navajo Nation is actually what flipped Arizona.
Oh.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Navajo Nation. Yay!
Like by 97% turnout. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
of registered voters, right? Like that is
Yes.
significant,
COVID,
and that's one of those.
there were Native women that were driving people back and forth to the polls all day long. Yep.
Wow.
Well, thank goodness they weren't in the same situation as Oklahoma, where they roped them out of the ballot. But yeah, wow.
Hi, Skye. This is
Mhm.
Sylvan. I am on the phone. I was not able to get the app running to watch the visuals, but thank you for describing everything so that I could watch and Google names as you mentioned them. I thought this was really fantastic, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about the duality because powwows were not exactly legal. It's only recent decades that they've been legal and that people were even allowed to not be scorned for being Native American, like my own family. Our paperwork, there's no paperwork. We have no technical blood trail, so to say, except for the mythology. And so my own upbringing of duality is, it's whitewashed, if you want to put. So what is the future for your son and other generations who are coming up and learning about being Native American and seeing the new artwork that's coming out that's not traditional? I remember 2 years ago, I walked into the Institute of American Indian Arts and was just so proud to see Native American artwork that was not just traditional, and learning about land acknowledgement. It really does put me at ease. But I was just curious, what is the future for the new generations and other communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we have to recognize and honor that blood quantum is something created by colonizers to eradicate us, right? Like as a culture and as a people, right? There's no one else that has to like prove their pedigree, right? That has to be registered with a tribal identification card to be considered like Native enough, right? And so understanding that piece of our history is really important. And if you are in a position to be able to be an educator or to be connected in your community, helping to dispel these myths and helping to understand what the real history is, and understanding that the vast majority of us are biracial, multiracial, experience that duality of navigating and understanding if you grew up with traditions, right, and ceremony, and then connecting into professional worlds and realms where that may not be honored and that may not be accepted. And so being able to show up is really important, and being able to have representation and being able to have access to that history and challenging it, right? Like any of us, if we hear some sort of a mythological perspective or hear about Native people talked about as though they're in the past, right? Like doing what we can to interrupt that and to challenge those perspectives. And so I think that future is now. I think we're part of that one of the first generations that can be proud of being Native, right? Like I remember one of the very first things that my grandmother told me when I was about 7 years old, and we're looking through pictures, and I saw a picture of my dad, who has much darker skin than I do. We were looking at pictures, and she said, yes, you're part Native, and that's something that we used to be ashamed of, right? Like, and that's in her generation, right? It wasn't something that we could honor, right? It's something that you had to be ashamed of. And I think that we are at a point now where we can celebrate and we can honor who we are fully, and we have to continue to work to create identity safe spaces and to be able to create a sense of belonging for folks, and to show up fully in who we are as Native people, and honoring culture and traditions and decentering whiteness and white supremacy culture. So I don't know if that's a total answer to what you're asking, but those are just some thoughts on that. Thank you, Sylvan.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I think Jordan, you're like dying to say something though. I think you had a question that didn't get quite answered. So feel free to go first.
Okay, you can tell. I don't know how you can misread me. I don't understand. Okay, so I had a quick question. So I make greeting cards, and I recently was trying to do Native American type cards, for people that I want to give sell them to. Anyways, long story short, I wrote something. I love wolves, and that's probably why I got this flute from my friend, because he knows how much I love wolves. My question to you was, is there some type of can you have some type of connection with that, or is because my grandma was Cherokee, and she was very much of she would go to powwows. I think she was I don't, it's something real big. I can't remember the name, but it's real big, and she was always there, and she was in the center of the circle, and I think she ran the circle. I don't know what that's called, but I would love to learn more. So I'm just curious, is there anything that you could tell me based on?
Yeah, what
I
I
don't
would
know how to explain it.
recommend, if you've been disconnected from your family and from your culture, is to really reconnect. And so I don't know if you're local to the Austin area, but I definitely recommend connecting with Great Promise for American Indians. We've got monthly cultural celebrations that we offer, and potlucks, and learning the dances and the songs and the traditions, and we're from all over, right? And so I think that that's a great way, is just connecting with your local community and finding out what you can from your family, right? Because no one else is going to help you honor that culture if you don't take those steps yourself, right? And so I think
Well, I would have asked her, but she's no longer here. So I'm I want to know more, but I have to look through all this stuff that she had. So I was I don't know where that's at.
Right.
So I'm wanting to learn more. And so this was a really good opportunity for me to learn more about different tribes, different cultures. So thank you.
Jordan, when we're able to come back together, the Great Promise for American Indians actually offices in our building. And, and they are a wonderful organization that you connect with. And like Skye said, they're doing a lot virtually, so you can Google them and try to connect with them. That'd be a great place for you to start to learn a little bit more.
Awesome, thank you.
And Skye, my question is, as a non-citizen of United States, how do you feel about me doing land acknowledgements? Is there some cultural thing? Because I'm already on, I don't know. If you can help me with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely invite you again to connect with me directly, and we can kind of talk more about in what ways that you might use that. I work with a lot of different individuals and different organizations who want to use a land acknowledgement and want to do it in the right way, in the proper and authentic way. And so it's really rooted in the intention behind it, and what is your intention behind using the land acknowledgement, and what do you hope to be the outcome of this land. This is something that is done internationally, right? We're all indigenous from somewhere, and so honoring the original peoples of the land is important, right? And the way that we do it is important.
Thank you, because I definitely feel like I should do something, but I feel like I'm not American, but I do occupy this land. So there is a lot of going on internally. But I would love to talk to you more about it, how I could do it with respect and in a good intention.
Yeah, I have a friend I see here on the call as well, Susie Epstein, and she's actually shared, I've shared a land acknowledgement with her, and she now shares it more broadly as well. So I'm happy to support that in any way.
My daughter's, who was with me earlier, government teacher does a land acknowledgement before each class when they start their class. And he's been doing that the entire year, because I asked her a while back when we did our land acknowledgement for our event that you worked with us to do. I said, do you know about land acknowledgements? And she said, oh yes, they open our class with that. So I thought that was great that the learning about that.
I also am not American. I'm foreign. And And I've lived in lots of states, and I've lived in the Southwest where the tribal presence is a lot more obvious. I've been surprised as a snobby foreigner to come to be in different places in America where I meet people who have no idea about any Native American or indigenous cultures in their area or in general, apart from stereotypes, and no interest in it. And it's always been baffling to me. And also, I've lived in cities where there's no obvious Native community that you can find unless you go looking for it. So whereas being in the Southwest, it was just such a everything's there, everything's out and there and present, and it's a blessing to be able to learn more about where I am now. So thank you.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share. Thank you for being here tonight.
A pleasure.
Yes. Well, Skye, I want to thank you again. Yes. I reached out to a couple of different indigenous organizations in town when I was searching for a land acknowledgement, and it was a real pleasure that it brought me back to you. And I'm delighted that we've introduced you now to a number of people on this call, and that we will continue to get better as a white people to acknowledge our sins and work toward reconciliation and an affirmation of the lives of everyone. And so I'm delighted that you are here tonight.
Miigwech, Celia, I appreciate it, and I'm so glad that this journey has brought us back together again. We worked together over almost 10 years ago, right? Like we've met each other, right? And in different ways. So thank you so much, and thanks for all you do with Artspark and everyone who contributes to that. It's just such important work, and creating access and opportunities and inclusion for everyone is just so important.
Terrific.
Thank you to our Artspark Texas funders, Texas Commission on the Arts, National Endowment for the Arts Creative Forces, St. David's Foundation, Cultural Arts City of Austin Economic Development, and Reeve Foundation Quality of Life Program.